This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, live in the Matt Black Kia Studios, hanging out with you ahead of Flyers hockey tonight. Flyers back in action versus the Penguins. That's right. No Sidney Crosby tonight. We will get into why that is. Also, Kevin Durso will join us at 6:20 because we also got to get into fans are in the arena tonight. The cap, according to reports, was 2,800 fans in attendance for the Penguins-Flyers game tonight. So we'll talk with Kevin Durso about all that coming up at 6:20. Of course, we take your text messages. As always, 609-403-0973. And hello to all of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. If you're following us on social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. We got a lot to get to. Also, the Sixers' big win last night. And I mean big as in definitive, demonstrative, impactful, whatever you want to call it. They went and took the game over mid to late game, and they just ran away from it from the Pacers. Listen, I thought the Sixers would cover the spread. I didn't think they were going to win by that much. That was ridiculous. There was a point where they were winning by, 28 points in the fourth quarter. I'm watching the game. I'm thinking, I didn't see this coming. I thought they might win by 6. Felt like they won by 60 at one point. It was just total landslide by the Sixers. We'll get to that in just a moment. But also, don't forget, my latest article over at 973ESPN.com. I agree with Terrell Owens about what he said about Donovan McNabb. What am I referring to? Well, the full article is right there at 973ESPN.com, the 973 ESPN mobile app. We'll get into that a little bit later in this hour as well. But I got to start with the Sixers stuff because, I'm watching the game last night, and it was so incredible to watch the bench step up for the 76ers last night. I told you guys yesterday that a huge reason why they lost that Cavs game was because they got nothing from the supporting cast. Absolutely, positively nothing. The opposite happened last night. The exact opposite. And I don't know if that's going to be something you can get night in and night out from this roster, but at least we know they have it in them. When you're watching the game last night, you saw that the insertion of Mike Scott into the lineup was a much better move for the Sixers production and the way the game went than Furkan Korkmaz. And I know Korkmaz has had success in the lineup himself, but I think in terms of Tobias Harris, if you're going to not be without Harris, you need a guy who can get some rebounds, who can do a little banging. Scott had defense. He had 4 steals last night. But the bigger thing was you had a bench that went out there and scored not just 30 points, not 40, not 50. You had a bench that scored 67 points last night. The bench. See, this is why you can win with this team. I'm not sitting here and say crown them, but I'm saying that this team has a lot of potential. In many ways, they are 1 or 2 more good pieces away from being able to go head-to-head with the Nets in a 7-game series. What I saw last night was a team where Embiid and Simmons trusted their teammates. They looked around and they said, "We believe in you guys. Let's go." And you saw Shake Milton. I don't know if he can do it every night, but the way he shot 3 for 5 last night from 3, the way that he just handled the ball, the way he worked a little Shake Milton magic, or as Tom McGinnis, a little shake and bake on the basketball court. Listen, he was exactly what you need. And Korkmaz, he had 6 threes last night. You look around all the guys who are not named Embiid and Simmons, and you saw the reason why this roster was built the way it was. Mike Scott, Danny Green, and Seth Curry combined for 5 threes by themselves. You put them together with Shake Milton and Furkan Korkmaz, that's 14 threes by those guys last night. Pretty good, right? Pretty darn good. That's kind of what you need, is it not? You need the supporting cast to go out there and support. There's a reason why they're called a supporting cast. I think we forget that sometimes. We get so focused on the stars. We get so focused on Ben Simmons and his shooting and Joel Embiid and how many games he's playing. But yet nobody can name me a team who won solely because of their stars in the last 20 years. You can't. I say 20 years on purpose because I know there's somebody out there who would be like, well, Michael Jordan. Although I would remind you that Michael Jordan never won anything until he got Pippen and Rodman and Horace Grant. You know, Jordan didn't hit all those game winners. It was Paxson. It was B.J. Armstrong. It was Steve Kerr. You need the supporting cast, folks. And we forget that sometimes. We forget that you need the guys around your superstars to step up. We get so focused on the stars, we forget about that it takes a team to win a championship. It is a team game. I know, it's not cool. It's not sexy to talk about it like that. But you don't win if Korkmaz, Shake Milton, Mike Scott, and everybody else don't step up and do their job. Because we saw that in the Cavs game. I'm sitting there watching the Cavs game on Saturday night, and I'm thinking, does anybody else want to score aside from Embiid and Simmons? Well, guess what happens? You win the game because people not named Embiid and Simmons scored last night. It's not rocket science. And listen, obviously the Sixers will make a deal, another move, another addition before the deadline. And whatever that addition or whatever that move is, it will help this team. But don't you ever undersell the importance of the supporting cast. I know there are some of you out there, you're on social media, you're on different platforms, you text the station 609-403-0973. You tweet at us at 973ESPN. You comment on our Facebook posts, 973ESPN. We see you out there. We appreciate your engagement. But it doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I don't have to agree with the fact that you think that this team can never win unless Ben or Joel do X, Y, Z, or the person who says that Ben Simmons trade him for a bag of basketballs, or the person who turns around and says that Joel Embiid, you can't win with a guy like that. Well, I'm telling you, you can't win unless the guy that Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are passing to can make a shot. That's the real reason why guys like Kyle Lowry are being mentioned. That's a big reason why guys like PJ Tucker are being talked about. The reason why those guys' names come up isn't because Ben and Joel stink or Tobias is a bum. It's because you need somebody to make a shot who's open. If all the attention is on stopping Embiid, Simmons, and Harris on many nights, the other two guys in the court have to hit shots too. That's why you brought Seth Curry in. That's why you brought Danny Green in. That's why you brought these guys here. And if you have any small measure of lacking faith in them to get that job done, then you got to find somebody else who can do it. Got to find somebody else to do it. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. This is Game Night. We'll be talking with Flyers versus Penguins coming up in 10 minutes with Kevin Durso here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill brought up an interesting topic a little bit earlier on the Sports Bash. We were talking with Andrew DeCecco about the quarterback situation. And, he asked me about the fact that, these quarterbacks. And listen, when I say this, I'm not trying to speak ill of the quarterbacks out there because there's some phenomenal talents in this draft, okay? Whether it's someone like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, the heat-seeking missile, or the height rise, or whatever we called it earlier. The point is that these are talented quarterbacks. But talent is not the only thing that matters. We get so hung up on the talent of guys sometimes. we forget about the intangibles. We overlook the intangibles that Jalen Hurts has. We overlook the fact that Jalen Hurts brings to the table something more than just arm strength, running ability, athleticism. I don't have faith that unless your name is Trevor Lawrence, you're going to come in here and do any better than what Jalen Hurts will do next year. If you want to argue about 5-10 years from now, we can have that argument. But for next year, I don't see any of those guys coming in here and outplaying those guys. Not at all. Think about it like this. Justin Fields, when he has had to go out there and play certain teams, he doesn't play lights out. Remember, 2 straight years versus Clemson. Had a couple struggles. Had some issues. Zach Wilson has had some injury issues. He's a little injury prone. Biggest game of the year against Coastal Carolina. First half looked pretty average. Now I know the experts out there will tell me, oh, well, you can't hold one game against Zach Wilson. The Ohio State fans will tell me, well, you can't hold Clemson against Justin Fields. Well, actually, I can. Because that's how evaluating is done. You find the games that they were bad, and you watch them again and again and again. So you can differentiate between the games against the cupcakes and the games against the higher quality competition. You got to sit there and figure out, did they make a mistake because it was just an honest mistake? Or was there a serious problem here? You got to sit down and figure out, why is Zach Wilson had the injury issues? Why did he struggle at times versus Coastal Carolina? Why did Justin Fields struggle at times against Clemson? Why did a couple times did he get hit and not get up immediately? Was it a fluke? Was it an accident? Or is there something more there? And I think those are things that you have to have a conversation about when you're comparing those guys to Jalen Hurts. Mac Jones, I get it. Everyone's in love with him right now. I know there's a handful of teams that think that can be great. What's he bringing to the table you don't really have with Jalen Hurts? I don't think Trey Lance is going to be ready next year to play. He's a guy who needs to sit behind a veteran. He's a guy that needs to go into a situation and just absorb the NFL. Absorb what the game and the league has to offer. I have no interest in Lance for the Eagles. Again, it's not that these guys are bad, but they're not bringing something unique to the table that you can't already get from Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has leadership. Jalen Hurts has arm strength. He has athleticism. He has the ability to lead men to the promised land. He took not one but 2 FBS high-caliber football programs to the College Football National Championship. He saved Alabama's season a couple years ago when Tua went down in the SEC championship game. He's a really good quarterback. Give him a chance to prove it. That's what I want to see. That's why I don't want the Eagles to draft anybody with the 6th overall pick. Get a comment in here. People watching on Facebook at 973 ESPN. Dominic chimes in, says, don't pick a quarterback at 6 unless it's Zach Wilson. Listen, Dominic, I understand there's a group of people, and it seems like you're one of them, that really likes Zach Wilson. And I understand, in a year where we didn't see as much college football as we usually would, BYU got on television a lot. He has a skill set. He has great arm talent. He does a very good job at throwing off of platforms. He's someone who doesn't need to keep his feet perfectly in the pocket to make the pass. He's got some great skills. I just have questions about, can he stay healthy? Number one. And number two, how do you explain the Coastal Carolina game? You're the most high-powered offense in college football. You're crushing and running all over everyone, but Coastal Carolina limited you in the first half of a game? Seems a little weird to me. Now, maybe it's a fluke. Maybe not. By the way, shout out to Paul watching on Facebook. Yes, Paul. Now, this is not a Shield shirt. This is a Roman Reigns Fight Leukemia shirt. So, but I appreciate your eye for the symbol there. Yes, it is the Roman Reigns symbol there on the shirt, but it's a Fight Leukemia shirt. Paul, Dominic, thanks for watching on Facebook at 973 ESPN. We'll get to the text board a little bit later this hour at 609-403-0973. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night coming up a little bit later this hour. But first, we got Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider, joining me next to get into Flyers versus Penguins. Fans are in the building tonight in Pittsburgh, but no Sidney Crosby. All that and more coming up next on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on video on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show. Just follow 97.3 ESPN.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Top of the hour, Flyers hockey is on your radio on 97.3 ESPN. Flyers versus Penguins tonight. They're in Pittsburgh. But guess what? The fans are back in Pittsburgh. But you know who is not going to be around in Pittsburgh? It's that guy, Sidney Crosby. That's right. No Crosby tonight for the Penguins. So getting to all that and more. Joining me right now on the Boardwalk Out Hotline and live on the Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter streams. It is our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, joins us. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So let's first get to the Sid the Kid news. Obviously, that news came down, and I was texting you earlier. It's like, hey, the fans are back, but they're not going to see the superstar on the ice because, COVID.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that was a shocker this morning. No question about it. When Mike Sullivan announced that Crosby wasn't available, he was going on the COVID list, it was really a shocker because you know that he doesn't miss a lot of time. He's missed time in the past with injuries, but it really has to be something significant for him to not be in the lineup. And, it's no secret what kind of performances he has against the Flyers, too. So it was really surprising that we got to this point just, a few hours before the game, and now he's not available.
Now, when you think about it, you and I talked about a while ago about the protocols, about how, this was part of their new rule, right? This was like, no morning skate the game of. That way, in case there is a situation with COVID, that there's no contact tracing, no games being canceled. It seems like, at least in this situation, these new protocols actually worked to save this game.
Yeah, no question. And I mean, I just looked at the COVID update within the last hour or so when today's list came out. And actually, the league is at the best point that they've ever been. There's only 3 players on the list league-wide, which is the lowest it's been since the start of the season. And that included 2 new additions. Crosby was one, and Ryan Johansson from Nashville was on the list too. So that's pretty significant that 2 players got added today, but it's still the lowest that it's ever been so far this season. So, yeah, everything that's been going on in the last couple of weeks, pretty much since the Flyers situation came up, pretty much going on 3 weeks ago now, and they're finally free and clear, and they're back with the full lineup. And does it give you some pause when you hear a guy on the opposing team goes on the list the day of? Sure it does, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that we're not seeing. I'm sure that's being taken to make sure that all the precautions are met, to make sure that everybody's good to go for this game. And everybody at the time, when Mike Sullivan announced it, it didn't seem like it was a concern for the rest of the team. It just sounded like it was a situation for Crosby himself. So maybe that means it's not something that's week-long. There were a lot of people I saw out there that were kind of making the assumption, so he's out for the week now, right? Not necessarily. He can come off the list possibly as soon as 2 or 3 days from now, and at least Saturday could still be on the table for him. So it's not a given that he's out for the week, but obviously it's a possibility because once you're on that list, it's really an unknown timetable.
And really quick, just to clarify a little more on that, isn't part of that because of the fact that if he himself doesn't test positive, that's one set of rules versus if you test positive, correct?
It kind of is, yeah. It's, there's a certain amount of negative tests you can have following a potential positive or a contact tracing situation where you might be able to come off the list. We actually saw it recently. The Rangers had Keandre Miller go on the COVID list the night the Flyers were playing the Rangers last Wednesday, and he was off the list 2 days later and able to play in their next game. So he missed that game against the Flyers and then came right back 2 days later because he was off the list because it was probably just a contact situation. So that's kind of how it plays out. But obviously, Mike Sullivan kind of alluded to the fact that it doesn't sound like it's very good information, just because he even said you can take all the precautions in the world and be as safe as you want to, and it doesn't mean that you're completely safe from it. So it sounds like Crosby's in a situation where he at least probably has a positive test that could be a false positive, and they're just waiting to see what happens. But it definitely took him out of play for tonight, for sure.
97.3 ESPN.com Flyers Insider Kevin Durso joins us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. Flyers versus Penguins tonight, right here on 97.3 ESPN and 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Before we get to all the details of the game tonight, I want to ask you another thing about the game. That's the fans. We're going to have fans in Pittsburgh. Now, I believe the cap is, 2,800, correct?
Yeah, in Pittsburgh, it was 2,800.
So now, what can we expect from the crowd? Because I've seen other places in the NHL where the way it works is that we still have the tarps on the one side of the arena, but then when the cameras pan to where the cameras are, the fans are sitting under there. Is that a similar setup we can expect from Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, because it's still very new territory for a lot of places. This is the first time the Flyers have played a team that's allowing fans in the building. I believe that this story was that, like, when they played in Buffalo over the weekend, Buffalo's closing in on it, but it wasn't in time for when the Flyers were there. Same thing for New Jersey. They had played there recently, but it wasn't on the table at that time. They haven't played a whole lot of road games either. I mean, you take out, if you include the Lake Tahoe game in that, they've really been home for a good stretch. This is really their longest road trip to date this season so far. So we haven't had the chance to see what teams are doing to make new adjustments to this and to find a way to accommodate fans. The one commonality I seem to be seeing with a lot of these places is that there's this creation of pods that will hold groups that come together. So 2 or 4 people who come together. I think they're maxing it out at 6 in very limited numbers, but they're creating pods. So I wonder if that's going to be set up on one side, opposite side. I'm considering also what the league has done recently in their protocols with the benches. Nobody directly behind the players' bench. They recently did that with the penalty boxes as well, so there's no glass. The Flyers had actually come up with a pretty good idea, I thought, because I don't know if it was being done at other arenas, but instead of having glass back there, they had netting back there now, so it does at least provide a line of protection behind where the players are so that, a puck doesn't fly out of play just randomly and go all the way up 10, 15 rows behind there, but I don't think you're going to see fans that close to that either anytime soon. So I'll be curious, the fact that it's not only happening in Pittsburgh, but it's coming back to Philly too, and it's going to happen within the next week. It'll be really interesting to see where the whole setup is, where they decide to put fans, if they decide to move where the media has been over the last few weeks and put them in a different location. It'll just be interesting to see how they decide to accommodate that, but it's good to have fans back in the building because, over time, you started to get used to the fake crowd noise a little bit, but it doesn't compare to having a real crowd in there. And just watching a highlight of a game where there was a crowd in there, it's a totally different element. And it's ironic that this is, at least in Philly, it's ironic this is going to happen on March 7th is the date that the Flyers will be able to welcome fans back for the first time, because it was March 10th that was the last game with fans a year ago. So it's almost exactly 1 year to date that they had fans in the building, then didn't have a season anymore, then all of these things to get the playoffs in, get a new season underway, and finally fans are allowed back.
Yeah, there's a lot of feeling of irony going around. I know for me, for example, down here in Atlantic City, for me, I was at the last MAC game before they shut down sports in Atlantic City at Boardwalk Hall. And for me, now I'm going to be covering the MAC again at Boardwalk Hall next week. And it's just like, last time I was here was before the shutdown. And now it's almost like the same thing for the Flyers and these other teams coming together this March. It's like a year ago we were shutting down, and now we're just coming out of it. It's definitely a very strange feeling. Kevin Durso joins us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Let's get into that game specifically tonight. I want to start with the goaltenders. Carter Hart back in net. Very good weekend for him and Brian Elliott. Jari, he's had a mediocre season all for all intents and purposes. But I want to with Carter Hart specifically because you mentioned to Mike Gill yesterday that Carter Hart plays well against everyone but Boston. Do you think that will continue tonight because of the fact that, listen, I know some people will say, well, there's no Sidney Crosby. Of course he'll play better. But, Malkin is still a phenomenal player. They still have some serious talent, Gensel, Rust. They have some guys who can score on the Pittsburgh side of the puck.
Yeah, they do. And, in making that statement about how Carter Hart seems like the Bruins have his number, that's kind of almost a team-wide statement. The Bruins seem to have the Flyers number, and they bring out the worst in the Flyers, so that's why the goaltending looks so bad on the other end too. Is, Carter Hart hasn't been sharp against the Bruins at all this season, but at the same time, the team hasn't played well either in front of them, and they haven't been able to play against Boston with a full-strength lineup, and finally they're getting back to that. It's a little bit of a new dynamic with trying to get everybody back in the lineup. Travis Konechny's in the lineup, but he's on the fourth line tonight, and that was basically the only reason for it is he didn't have a full practice yet. So they're just trying to ease him back in. Konechny said he wanted to play. Alain Vigneault accommodated that and said, okay, we're going to put you on the fourth line for now. Nick Aube-Kubel is the guy who comes out, and that's a little bit of a head-scratcher for some people. It's mainly due to the position he plays. He's a natural right winger, so is Konechny. You kind of had to do process of elimination. Who are you not taking out? They've been trying Nolan Patrick there. They want to give him another game there. You're not taking Joel Farabee out of the lineup, and you're not taking Jake Voracek out of the lineup. So Aube-Kubel was kind of the guy who was the odd man out in that situation. So that's how you fit everybody back in. But on the Pittsburgh side of things, I think we can expect Carter Hart to have another strong game. And it's not just because Crosby's out of the lineup. I mean, I think there's an irony to the fact that the Flyers have played 3 of their last 4 games. They played the Rangers without Artemi Panarin. They played the Sabres without Jack Eichel for a game. And then the game he came back, he was clearly not himself. And now they're going to play Pittsburgh without Sidney Crosby at least once, maybe twice, and maybe 3 times. Who knows? But they do have Malkin, and Malkin's had one of these really weird seasons so far where there's a lot of questions around his game too, his performance, the fact that he can be better. Mike Sullivan kind of called out the team, and obviously with all the changes going on for Pittsburgh, the GM change and Ron Hextall coming in, there's a lot of questions up in the air right now about this team. So there's guys out there with a lot to prove, and I don't think it matters that Crosby's out. You've still got to take this game and play it the same way you would have if he was in the lineup. You got to be tough and be the same way you were in Buffalo this weekend, winning puck battles and showing your speed and showing your commitment to being hard on the forecheck and creating those opportunities, having that shoot first mentality. All of those things were keys to success against Buffalo, and they can be against Pittsburgh as well.
You mentioned Travis Konechny. I wanted to ask you about him. He gets back into the lineup. At the beginning of the year when you and I talked, I mean, he was on fire. He was scoring goals, getting assists. And now, at this point, he has half the goals that JVR has on the year. And so you get this guy who could be an offensive fire plug, and you're just, oh, by the way, go to the fourth line. Like, it almost feels like it's like, hey, Travis, take a step back and maybe reevaluate. You're coming off of this COVID situation. Let's ease you back in the lineup. I actually like that idea by AV to not be like, all right, go on the first line. No, he's saying, hey, man, you want to play, but we're not expecting you to win the game for us.
Yeah, and it follows suit with everything AV's done to this point, too. With the exception of Claude Giroux, who kind of didn't really have much of a choice. I mean, first of all, Drew's your captain, so as your captain, I think he's going to have a little bit more of a say in what he wants to do. So if he wanted to come back and play in a regular role and his minutes increased, it was going to happen. And there wasn't exactly a lot of places where you could put him where you were saying you were easing him back in. There was half the lineup missing. He was going to go back in and probably get thrown into the fire more than likely. But when they got Voracek and Lawton and Lindblom back over the weekend, they were all put on the same line, and it was technically considered your third line, and there was every reason to do so because your top 2 lines were playing so well, and it kind of is the same way with Konechny. The third line now with those 3 guys has played well in 2 games, and the top 2 lines are really not worth breaking up at this moment, so it was the path of least resistance, in my opinion. It was just something where you got to keep everything else in your structure together the way that you like it so far, and now you get to bring back this player who is a top 6 fit for you, but you're not going to rush him into that situation. And, especially when Crosby's out, why not? You've got a chance to put him on a line and see how he reacts during the game, see how he adjusts to game speed in getting back from these 2 weeks that he's had off, and give him time to do that instead of trying to expect him to be what he was in the second game of the season when he went out and had a hat trick against this team. So I think it's a great idea to ease him back in. And it doesn't mean that it's permanent, even just be in this game. I think Alain Vigneault kind of left the door open that if things are opening up the right way, if he's performing as well as they hope he can, then he might move up during the game and they might shuffle some things around. But, as is typical of an Alain Vigneault style here, if things are going well for the Flyers, then don't expect much change. Just expect it to stay the way it is.
Flyers versus Penguins tonight, 7 o'clock, right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can listen to the game on your phone. Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider, joining me here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Kevin, Flyers are currently 2 points ahead of the Penguins in the standings. They currently have that 4th slot. How do you feel about these 3 games here that the Flyers have coming up? How much can this really determine what they have going forward? Or do you feel like because of how the schedule is laid out right now that there's a possibility that no matter what happens the next 3 games, that the Flyers are really not going to, for lack of a better term, get too much self-determination just yet?
Yeah, it's tough to say, and part of the reason is because, you don't want to just evaluate, we want to evaluate this team based on a healthy lineup, but it's hard to do when you're also playing an opponent that doesn't have their best guy either, and so when they had to play with half of a lineup, but Artemi Panarin wasn't in for the Rangers, it evened itself out. The Flyers won the game. When the Flyers had to play with a bunch of guys coming back from the COVID list for their first game, and Buffalo doesn't have Jack Eichel, there's an evened out element to the game where, okay, now everything lines up, and the Flyers maybe not at their best still, although they sure looked their best this weekend. But still, these guys are just coming back. It's hard to tell how their conditioning is going to look from one day to the next With Pittsburgh without Crosby, it makes it harder to evaluate, but at the same time, it's no different than playing Panarin without, the Rangers without Panarin or the Sabres without Eichel. It's an opportunity for you to continue to establish your place with the healthy lineup. The situation is right for you. Look, I know the way Sidney Crosby is felt in the city, and that there's a rivalry here and people don't like him and the feeling is mutual, but you wish him the best because this is not a situation to take lightly. In his case, you want him to be back on the ice as soon as possible from a hockey standpoint and from a human element as well. But this is an opportunity that since he's not in the lineup, you do have to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you. And the Flyers have an opportunity, not just tonight, but maybe in the games to come against this team where they might be able to do something that can expose the Penguins one way or another and give them even more separation in that 4th spot, move them up in the standings perhaps. I mean, the good news for the Flyers is that the lack of games that they've played this season makes that 4th spot not really a true evaluation for them because they are the top team in the East Division by points percentage. So that's a good sign that they are competing with just about everybody. Even some of those Boston games, I know people don't think it this way because it's of the final scores, the way that the third period went against those teams, but they've competed against Boston for, at least 2 or 3 of those games where the game was close, getting into the later stages of the game. So they're right there with them sometimes, and they're just not finishing it off. So they're showing they can hang with just about anybody in this division, and all it takes now is probably finishing off a game against Boston to really prove that they're capable of winning against anybody in the division. But you have to take advantage of the games against the other teams. So far, they've done that against the Rangers and the Sabres, who are toward the bottom. You've got Pittsburgh out of the picture right now in the playoffs, and it's still really early to say playoff, matchups and playoff contention and things like that because there's a lot of teams that could switch with just 2 wins against the same opponent. But you've got an opportunity here to really establish your place and continue to do what you started to do last week and over the weekend.
Kevin, before I let you go, you mentioned expose the Penguins. How do the Flyers go about exposing the Penguins tonight?
Well, you've kind of mentioned one of the angles already, and that's that Tristan Jarry hasn't had the best year, and you've kind of had his number early on in the season too. You scored 6 against him in the opener, and then scored 4 or 5, 4 against him and 5 in the second game. So you've had his number, and you've scored against him already. And defensively, this team has been shaky at times as well. You can get them off of their game defensively and really get them chasing the play and really get them out of position, which creates some really great opportunities for you to score. And definitely in transition as well. When you can get them in transition, it really can set you up. So if the Flyers continue to play the way they did in Buffalo, that sound defensive game that limits shot opportunities, limits quality chances, and then allows them to go the other way, whether it's in transition or whether it's just really creating a dominant cycle game and good forechecking that leads to more shot opportunities and more, even drawing more penalties to get on the power play more often. I know it's not really the biggest area of success for the Flyers this season, but that keeps you in possession of the puck and it keeps you kind of in control of the game. So those are the areas where I look for the Flyers to try to throw the Penguins off just a little bit and see if they can't take advantage, especially early in the game.
He's Kevin Durso. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso, our Flyers insider at 973 ESPN.com, I should say. Check out his full Flyers preview up on the website, and he'll have a recap after the game as well. Don't forget, Open Ice Hits, the podcast, Durso and Broads. Great podcast on the entire NHL. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Great stuff, Kevin.
Thanks, Josh. Look forward to talking to you later in the week.
Absolutely. Of course, the Flyers going with the Penguins multiple times this week. Just going bang, bang all the way down the row. So we'll talk with Durso again on Thursday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your thoughts and comments at 609-403-0973. And for all of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973ESPN, we'll get to you folks as well coming up next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, my FanDuel Sportsbook pick of the night is coming up as well. We will get you that for the evening here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, all your Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, and high school sports coverage over at 97.3 ESPN.com is on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, as well as you can listen to Flyers hockey right there on the app. And don't forget, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just follow 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash with Mike Gill, Game Night with yours truly, live in video here in the Matt Black Kia Studios on 97.3 ESPN.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, live in the Matt Black Kia Studios, 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City, and we are live streaming on video, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show. Of course, FanDuel is bringing you Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. My friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm always finding new player props and game lines that I like with FanDuel Sportsbook. And now you combine those props with other bets for same-game parlays. That's right. Same-game parlay bet. You can only find them at FanDuel Sportsbook. Combine point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more into a same-game parlay. Get a big payout on a small bet. And right now, new and existing users can get up to $25 in site credit back each day if your parlay falls one leg short with same-game parlay insurance. That's right, same-game parlay insurance every day with FanDuel Sportsbook. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app now. Use my promo code Hennig to get same-game parlay insurance. Or if you're an existing user, same-game parlay insurance, you're grandfathered in. You're already there. You already got it. You just got to go to that section on the app. So again, same-game parlay insurance, same-game parlays, FanDuel Sportsbook. Use my promo code Hennig when you sign up to get in on all the action. Must be 21 or to play. Full terms and conditions at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. We'll get to your thoughts and comments. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, everyone watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, we'll get to you guys as well here on 97.3 ESPN. I'll get to you guys in just a moment, but I want to remind all of you my latest article over at 973ESPN.com. Terrell Owens is talking about Donovan McNabb again, but it's not the way you might think. I know that T.O. has had some very, very interesting things to say about Donovan over the years, positive and negative. Well, now he's actually saying something positive about him. He says Donovan McNabb is the third best quarterback to ever throw him a touchdown. Third best. That's at least his opinion. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because when you think about the quarterbacks he played with, you know, Steve Young, Tony Romo, Donovan McNabb, Jeff Garcia, Carson Palmer, Drew Bledsoe, you know, these are quarterbacks who have had pretty good careers, but he says Donovan McNabb is the third best. I have to agree with him. Listen, there's no way anybody in their right mind is going to say that Donovan McNabb is a better quarterback than Steve Young, okay? It's just not the way it works, all right? I think that when you look at the situation with Romo, obviously he loves Romo. He thought very highly of Romo. There's a lot of people who still think Romo's could have been one of the best quarterbacks if it wasn't for some of the injuries he sustained and some of the shenanigans that happened down in Dallas. But listen, I don't think T.O.'s crazy. Go to 973ESPN.com, see for yourself. Come up with your own opinion. But I lay it out there for you why all the details, I think. And part of it has to do with if you compare the stats when T.O. was with each guy. When T.O. had his run with Steve Young, when T.O. had his run with Jeff Garcia, when T.O. had his run with McNabb, when he had his run with Romo, you're going to see, when you look at the numbers as I put them out there, that realistically, McNabb really is the third best. And it's partially because of the fact that if you look at the time frames that he played with all those guys, McNabb's not far behind them, but Steve Young is a Hall of Famer, and Romo had some pretty gaudy stats, and him and T.O. were ridiculous together. So I totally get it. I personally would put Steve Young first and Romo second, but I totally understand why he did that. And I think you got to give T.O. credit for being objective, being honest, and not being ridiculous. So, again, 97.3 ESPN.com. I explained to you why I am with T.O. That Donovan McNabb is the third best quarterback he ever played with. Also, I got a very interesting stat in there about Jeff Garcia you might want to see. You know, Jeff Garcia without Terrell Owens, not very good. Not a great quarterback. Just saying. It's funny how that works. You know, your supporting cast, as I mentioned with the Sixers earlier, helps you be good, helps you be better. It's funny how that works. All right, say a couple texts at 609-403-0973. I'll try to queue up Dan and EHT. It's a text. It's a little long, Dan, so I'm trying to shorten it just a little bit so we can show it to the people watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. Dan's a good texter. We don't always agree, but he's a good texter. Here we go. Dan EHT says, every NFL team is in search for that next great quarterback. The question is it better to build around a team around an average quarterback or try to find a great quarterback? And then Dan goes on to say that he personally would draft Wilson if possible. All right, couple things. First of all, I'm not sold on this thing with Wilson, okay? I get that there's a contingent of people out there who like Zach Wilson, okay? And I'm not saying he's going to be a bad quarterback. But if you think Zach Wilson is going to be better than Jalen Hurts, either he didn't show it in college or Jalen Hurts is the bum. There's no way that Zach Wilson, who is injury prone, by the way, Zach Wilson, who had trouble with Coastal Carolina, Zach Wilson, I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback. Now, back to Dan and EHT's question. He says, every quarterback is in search of that great, every NFL team is in search of the great quarterback. The question is it better to build a team around an average QB or try to find the next great QB? I don't think there's a right answer to that because Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. You know who won a Super Bowl? Joe Flacco, Brad Johnson, Trent Dilfer. They won Super Bowls. Dan Marino, none. Warren Moon, none. Jim Kelly, none. John Elway, lost them all in the 80s, won them in the 90s with what? A better supporting cast. I don't think that's an accident. See, we give the quarterback so much credit that we forget about the rest of the team. Patrick Mahomes looked mortal in the Super Bowl because his offensive line was a bunch of backups and nobodies. I think there's a happy medium between constantly trying to search for the next great QB and making sure you build your team around who you have. You're right, Dan. Every team is in search of the next great QB. But not every team is good at evaluating those QBs or developing those QBs or building around those QBs. Sometimes you just got to stop looking for the perfect quarterback and win with the guy you have on your roster. I mean, heck, Trent Dilfer wasn't even the starting quarterback in Baltimore. Remember that fiasco? That was Tony Banks down there for a while. Dilfer came in later. And then Dilfer couldn't get along with Brian Billick, so they sent him out of town. They brought in Elvis Gerbach, and everything went sideways for them. A few years later, Brian Billick is fired, and they bring in John Harbaugh. So even when you win a Super Bowl, there's no guarantee it's going to work. Doug Peterson's been fired. Brian Billick's been fired. Mike McCarthy was in Green Bay fired. There's a strange situation when it comes to sports, when it comes to these coaches and these quarterbacks. And I'm just not sold on the idea that Jalen Hurts can't be the guy. Get one more text in here at 609-403-0973. Again, you also comment as you watch on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter Thanks earlier to Paul and Dominic for commenting on the stream as they watched on Facebook, 97.3 ESPN. Joey D in Ventnor chimes in and says, Josh, I feel like the Phillies will be in every game this year. If that's the case, the bullpen should be able to close out most of those games. I predict 89 wins in the second wild card. All right. Well, first of all, Joey D, I appreciate your Phillies enthusiasm. I do. But I got to tell you something. 89 sounds like a lot to me. I think the two problems here with the Phillies, number one, they're probably in the best division in all of baseball. The Braves, the Nationals, and the Mets are going to be extremely competitive. And unless they make another move that I don't know about before the trade deadline, I don't see the Phillies being an 89-win team. I can see them winning somewhere between 80 and 85 games, but I feel like 89 is a little bit too rich for me. But that's just me. I like the confidence, though, Joey D. Thanks, Kevin McCormick, for joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, Flyers versus Penguins tonight. Steve Coates, Tim Saunders on the call here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget your FanDuel Sportsbook promo code Hennig when you sign up for Same Game Parlay Insurance. Again, that's Hennig, Hennig. When you sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook, Same Game Parlay Insurance, get $25, up to $25 back on your parlay if you fall one leg short. Again, when you sign up with promo code Hennig with FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Again, check out my latest article, Why I Agree with Terrell Owens, over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Have a great night, everybody.